call them legs, but turning movements, critical movements that people make in terms of right hand and left hand, etc. Different turns that they're making on and off those streets. And the level of significance threshold in the city in the town of Atherton is that if a project includes trips that would increase one of those intersection movements beyond a 0.8-second delay, is considered a significant impact. So in the, actually I have it, in the eastbound lane, there is the project-related trips would create a 10-second delay in the AM peak hour, and at the same turning movement, a 32.8-second delay in the PM peak hour. So what the mitigation is to improve the level of service from currently it's an F, even without the project?
Currently it's an F.
I believe so. Currently it's an F, but we can certainly look that up in terms of the tables that are in the draft EIR. But so currently it's an F. So the way to address the traffic that is currently there and what the project effects would be is to provide a signal at that particular intersection, and that's what the town says that they want.
And what would I'm sorry, I was just going to ask the level of service after the traffic.
I understand, but why don't you wait for her to finish, and we'll open it up to questions from both the council, the commissioners, as well as the
Okay. So with that signal, it would be a level of service A in the AM and in the PM peak hour. The second significant but mitigable impact was in regards to parking demands in conjunction with the use of existing facilities for large events, which would be the pavilion primarily, could exceed the available capacity of the parking supply within the park. And the mitigation measure essentially was to require coordination of events occurring at the park. We did an analysis of weekday peak demand at the park for parking, as well as weekend peak demand at the Saturday analysis, essentially, of the park. So all of that is in the draft EIR, and the mitigation measure essentially is to require coordination of larger events over a particular number of people to ensure that all of the users of the park on any particular day, there would be sufficient parking. And then to limit, if necessary, the number of persons who can attend an event on any given day at the pavilion, or to have the event coordinator essentially submit a trip reduction plan or parking reduction plan that the event would then have to comply with. So we did identify one significant and unavoidable impact in regards to transportation and circulation. And this was that the project would cause an increase in delay for critical movements at the El Camino Real and Watkins Avenue intersection by more than 0.8 seconds under the existing plus project and cumulative plus project conditions. So existing plus project are conditions that are occurring today. And future cumulative plus project are the conditions that would be occurring in the future when the project is built and is operating. So we looked into the future and made projections in terms of what we would see happening then. So we determined through the analysis that we could mitigate this particular impact with installation of a right turn lane at the westbound approach on Watkins Avenue, and that would improve this intersection operation to pre-project conditions, meaning with no additional traffic associated with the project or to the level of service that exists currently. However, we also determined that installation of this improvement may not be feasible or desirable due to secondary effects to residential uses and heritage trees which are within that particular existing right-of-way associated with the roadway. So we determined that even with the mitigation measures identified in the draft EIR, that these impacts may not be reduced to less than significant levels, and therefore it was considered significant and an unavoidable impact. CEQA guidelines require the analysis of a range of reasonable alternatives to the project or to the location of the project that would feasibly attain most of the project's basic objectives and avoid or substantially lessen any of the significant effects of the project. So the range of alternatives required in an EIR is governed by a rule of reason that requires the EIR to set forth only those alternatives necessary to permit a reasoned choice, essentially by the City Council, in their determination and deliberation in regards to certification of the EIR and approval of the project. And CEQA states that an EIR should not consider alternatives whose effect cannot be ascertained and whose implementation is remote and speculative. So therefore, we're just looking at the alternatives that we evaluated in the draft EIR are those that, that essentially the town has some control over.
Could you repeat that last phrase that ended with remote and speculative?
So CEQA states that an EIR should not consider an alternative whose effect cannot be ascertained and whose implementation is remote and speculative. So you could speculate if, a lot of times this comes up in, let's see, well, we have a number of, as I go on, I'll talk about, in fact, alternatives that we identified but did not further evaluate because the effect is, in fact, speculative because there is no, the town has no control over those particular sites or locations. So the draft EIR contained an extensive analysis of project alternatives, and the slide summarizes the 5 alternatives that were evaluated in depth in the alternatives chapter of the draft EIR. So we're required by CEQA to look at the no project alternative, which is that the existing conditions would continue just as they are. The current library building would stay the same, and that a new library would not be constructed in Holbrook Palmer Park. The second one was that a reduced library size in Holbrook Palmer Park would assume a 1-story, 10,000 square foot library at the project site, which is the location of the main house. The third was that North Meadows site within Holbrook Palmer Park would be the location for the 13,500 square foot library, which would also require the demolition of the main house. The existing library site, which assumes that the existing library next door to us would be demolished and that a 2-story, 13,500 square foot library would be constructed at that location. And then the town center site alternative assumes a 2-story, 13,500 square foot library within the redeveloped town center. CEQA requires that we identify what the environmentally superior alternative is if it's not the and it can't be the no project alternative. And in this case, after looking over all the alternatives, the Holbrook Palmer Park reduced library size alternative was considered the environmentally superior alternative. So we did look at and consider a number of alternatives that were identified or had been brought up as part of the scoping or that we, in coordination with the town, came up with. And then we identified and described them in the alternatives chapter, but then we rejected them from further in-depth analysis as they did not meet the basic project objectives or they created new significant adverse impacts that the project would not, or were so substantially similar to alternatives that were already being studied in depth that the analysis of them was not warranted. So these were renovation and reuse of the existing library, reduced library size, less than 8,000 square feet, other locations within Holbrook Palmer Park, other locations within the town center, existing library site, and other off-site locations. So the next steps, and I can go into more those questions about those, about the alternatives. The next steps in the CEQA process will be, as we said, to collect all the comments and to prepare the written responses to the comments, to complete the response to comments document, which we estimate should be available this summer. Then we decide that the planning commission then will be hearing and recommending to the city council in regards to the final EIR, and then go to the city council to consider certification of the final EIR, and then consideration of the project by the planning commission, parks and recreation commission, and then the city council. So with that, that ends my presentation. And so again, we're here tonight to hear your comments on the draft EIR and answer particular questions if you have them. And I'll return it back to the chair.
I think this is the time, if you have any questions on the report, or you to ask them. Are there any questions? Go ahead.
Should I go to the podium or may I ask it here?
You may ask it. Well, I think you have to go to the podium.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
I just want to, I'm kind of filling up on the part that I was asking at the
If I
moment.
can just interrupt.
Sandy
Point of order.
Crittenden, 117
Thank you
Heather
very
Drive.
much. If everybody can give their name and street for the record, it'd be appreciated.
The mitigation for the traffic at Watkins in Middlefield is suggesting a traffic light, is that correct?
Yes,
Okay. Currently, the service is an F,
I believe so, yes.
and after the traffic light is installed, it becomes an A.
Yes,
Okay, so we're actually improving the traffic flow by putting a traffic light more than the traffic that's put in from the new library. In other words, the addition of the extra cars from the library is being more than offset by the traffic light. Is that correct? Let me rephrase it then. We're at a level F without any mitigation. What is the addition of the library traffic due to that intersection?
well, that is certainly the gist of what's evaluated in the traffic and circulation report. So at this point, I would say that the mitigation measure for reducing the impact associated with the project is to put in a traffic signal. So, and that in fact would reduce this adverse effect associated with the project to a level of service A.
Great, thank you very much. Sounds like a nice opportunity to make a left-hand turn.
Are there any other questions of staff? Commissioners, do you have questions? Bill?
I guess I had one right at the end. On the other alternates considered, if you go back to that slide one time.
Yes.
No, not that one. That one. Who were the people that you talked to in order to get some of the answers that these should be rejected? How did you get the information to make that decision?
We started by collecting, of course, all of the suggestions that we heard as part of the scoping, and also working with the city staff, or town staff, I'm sorry, to come up with the most exhaustive list that we possibly could. And then we evaluated each of those sites by talking to, for example, Flood Park, or to these other locations that are in other jurisdictions, in terms of the information that we could ascertain from talking directly to planners in those other communities, or looking at their websites if we needed to find the zoning or the general plan designation that they had in those particular locations. In regards to Albert Palmer Park, I mean, we had the plan, and we had evaluated that site in particular.
Well, for example, the renovation and reuse of the existing library, where'd that information?
Well, there was a number of technical studies that were done prior to us becoming the environmental consultant, that were done by the town and also by the library committee in regards to the existing building in terms of its historical, as an historical resource, as well as the issues associated with its seismic issues. So we took the information that was existing from the technical reports that had been prepared on that existing building, and then we also did further evaluation in regards to the historical resources component to it.
Are you saying that this building over here is a historical resource?
Yes, because by virtue of the fact that the town has deemed it to be one. But that is in, there is a historic resources chapter in the draft EIR, and that goes into quite a bit of depth in regards to what the significance thresholds are in regards to the CEQA for a historic resource, and if it's essentially on the list that the local jurisdiction has for what are considered to be historic resources, that in some ways kind of automatically identifies it as one.
I think that may be
Or
in
eligible to
dispute.
be on a state or
Okay, no
federal
further
list.
questions.
And there's, yeah.
Yeah, this is, I'm sorry, I'll give you a chance in a moment, but I want the commission itself to ask the question at this point. Christie?
I have just a couple questions about the traffic in general. So my understanding of the EIR is that you studied all 5 options given, right? No library and one in the park and one rebuilding these in the existing location are reduced kind of equally. Is that my understanding, or is there a preference for the library in the park site? Well, so here's my question with traffic, and maybe you can answer. The traffic impacts for an option not in the park would seemingly affect Fair Oaks and Middlefield, and that intersection was not looked at. And also Ashfield Road and El Camino, for any site other than in a park, and increased library usage would seem to impact those intersections, and they were not looked at in the EIR. So
Do you mean if it were at the, if it was at the existing location, or if it was in the town center?
if it's in the town center or the existing location, all the traffic will come from Watkins, it will come from El Camino, and potentially from other intersections. I'm just curious to see that those intersections are also probably Ds and Fs, and additional traffic on those intersections would impact those.
We did, I'm sorry. Yeah, we did not look at those. We identified the intersections based in coordination with the town in terms of which ones to do. And we essentially did a screening analysis, and those were the ones that were in our study area intersections are the ones that were determined to be the most affected in terms of the level of service. But that's certainly a good comment.
It seems an omission to me for both the existing location and town center locations, those intersections would be impacted.
Mm-hmm. We can certainly look into that.
All right. My other comment, which may earn me scorn, at Watkins and El Camino, I know you looked at the possibility of a right turn lane being added, but what about a right turn only situation? That's a dangerous intersection, today without anything going on. I would never make a left turn there, but people do it despite the posted restrictions and otherwise at this point. So I don't know if it's feasible or otherwise, but what would be the impact of a right turn only at Watkins and El Camino?
Mm-hmm.
Those are my only comments for now.
William?
Some of these might sound like trivia, but they are questions for clarification.
Mm-hmm.
Bear with me. Page 40, table 3.3. If you look at page 124, you will not find any space allocated to the Atherton Civic Interest League, to the Atherton Games, or the foundation, Hobart Palmer Foundation, in page 1, on that table on page 40. But yet on page 124, you talk about space being devoted to them. There's a disconnect between those 2 pages.
Okay.
Following page 41, under 3 landscaping, it says approximately 37 trees. I can only count 21. Thank you. I would like to see where the 37 are. Anyway, I told you this is going to be a bit tedious. Page 69, it talks about, actually 70, where it says, quote, "The new building would be of similar height to the existing water tower structure. I'm trying to figure out, when I go back to page 69, is that kind of ground zero at the level of the park itself, or is the building level where the building starts up on the mound at which the present, what's called the main house? Where does that start? What are you measuring zero from? So that just needs clarification, because you equate it to the height of the water tower.
Right. On figure 3-5, there is proposed project massing, which shows that it's the ground level that we're measuring.
Well, ground level being the normal ground level, not the starting at the height of the mound of which the main house is built.
May I interject myself?
Two times.
The purpose of this, I think, is to clarify the staff report. I think we will have a section after the audience gets through with their comments.
Okay.
We'll make our comments, and your comments are well taken, but I think they
Staff will
belong
work
in the later
All right.
section.
You may be correct in that it's speculation, and allow me to get away from the mic.
And it may be a good idea. This is, what is that road?
Marsh.
This is Marsh Road, right? And you're talking about, there is a light here already, and you're talking about putting a light here, which I would certainly say is under 300 feet from the Marsh Road Middle Field intersection. That, if you try to turn left and meet another light, both of which happen to be red at the time, I speculate that that's going to cause a lot of people to try to sneak across and block that middle field Marsh Road intersection, creating a traffic difficulty there. So please address that at some time, because it may be speculation, but it's pretty damn good speculation. Thank you.
The questions I have would be in regard to the construction process. I assume that heritage trees would be, if they're to be removed, they'd be under the town ordinance.
That's correct.
And then
It would be part of the
any
entitlement
construction
process.
hours and so forth would have to at least meet the
The standards in the municipal code, correct?
municipal government.
Yes.
There's no special case.
Point of clarification on that. You talk about 8 to 5. Is that the correct for building construction hours? 8 to 5. I thought it was 8:30.
It's 8 to 5. Do we, you mentioned that the present library is a historical resource. Do we, by what document, and if there is such a document or action, may we have a copy of it?
So let's see. No. It just, we can certainly, well, there's, so in the historical resources section, which is C, there's the Atherton, Town of Atherton Historical Artifact Inventory, which is one of the documents that we relied on. There's also...
An artifact is not a building. Let's be very clear about that, or vice versa. That's in our ordinance.
Mr. Chair, to be even more clear, the purpose of this meeting is not to answer all of the comments that are presented. The purpose is to gather all the comments, go back to the experts, and they will come back with responses. So the answer, I think Mr. Gridley was absolutely correct in saying, can I get an answer to this? The answer, that's what's going to come back to you. And so the purpose was not for the environmental consultants to answer every question tonight. If they know the answer, that's great. But it may be that those will come back to you in the responses. In fact, that's the normal way.
I agree with what you say as the town council, but I think when a statement is made in the report, and you ask for the backup on that, I think that's a legitimate request. If it cannot be produced at this meeting, then I think it should be mentioned in the report, or copies should be given to the requester at a later date.
We certainly didn't bring copies of all of the
Oh,
reports that we relied on tonight, but
And that's why
yes, certainly,
the question
the
is.
town or we certainly have all
You
the
mentioned
copies.
in your verbal report, it was a historic resource. And
And the analysis
I'm
is
questioning
definitely.
the source of your statement. Did you, okay. We'll go back to the audience again. You wish to make other questions of the staff report, not commentary.
Okay.
You want to make a question, just to
Yes.
clarify it, and then we'll go into where comments are made, asking for clarification, correction, and so forth on the report.
My name is Ann Nerdine, and I live on Watkins. And I wanted to know if first of all, how was LSA chosen? Are you related to the architectural firm that prepared the March 28th report on the park?
I can answer that. If the chair would like a response at this time.
I think that's a fair question.
Thank you. The town sent out a
If we
request.
can give it a response.
I can do that. The town sent out a request for proposal to numerous firms that specialize in environmental review. We received proposals. Staff evaluated those proposals, conducted interviews, and selected the firm of LSA. They have no relation that I'm aware of, because they were required to submit a conflict of interest statement. They have no relation to Group 4 Architects or any other architectural firm, or my firm, or the city attorney's firm.
Thank you. That's comforting. And also, when you were mentioning in your report the consideration of alternatives, did you consider the park policy, San Mateo Public Park policy of renting meadows out, or allowing families to use a certain portion of the park to have parties? This is in addition to what the income stream comes from renting out the pavilion facilities. This is part of the sort of parks program, that if you want to have a family gathering, there's an area, usually it's next to the playground, where there's a lot of toddler birthday parties, and there's also a lot of local residents' parties on the green. And I believe as part of the park policy that will continue. So that is going to bring visitors and demand for parking in the park. And I just wanted to know if you considered that in your report.
Go ahead, I think if you can answer it, fine. If not,
We certainly worked very, very closely and in coordination with town staff as well as everybody at the park, and did a careful review of the park policies in regards to the general plan, as well as the park master plan. And so we took all of that into consideration in terms of the ongoing ways that the park is currently used and what's allowed in terms of renting and rentals and all of the situations that could occur under that.
So on page 40 and page 124, page somewhere the public usage of the park is and parking spaces required for that is mentioned.
The way we did it goes into great depth in regards to how we did the parking study and how parking spaces were allocated. But I happen to know that there was a general use category in terms of the park, but in terms of how big those birthday parties are, if it's a use that the town apologize again. If it's a use that the town does in fact rent out, then we had information on it in regards to how big, or how many people, or how many parking spaces it might have, and we incorporated all that information.
It's, yeah, I guess that usage would be hard to predict because it sort of goes through people who are reserving, you know, for their kids' birthday parties. It's pretty frequent. Pretty smart people take advantage of our nice, quiet, safe park. You also sort of mentioned that you mailed the report to Atherton residents, and in your report you said you mailed a copy of the report. I mean, I didn't see a copy of the report in the post office on the desk there. Maybe I should have gone to the planning meeting, but I found accessing the report kind of difficult. And how did you do that?
I think, in a way, these are questions that properly belong in the commentary period.
Oh, I'm sorry, then I'll reserve them for
So,
that. Okay.
I don't want to stop.
All right,
if
thank
there's
you.
something.
I could quickly answer that. The report itself was not mailed, but a notice of preparation, a notice that a draft EIR had been prepared was mailed by the town.
William, you have a
Yeah, thank you,
question?
Chair. Just a quick note on terms of process. There was a very clear, I don't know what the right word is, somebody correct me, there's a very clear deed of transfer with restrictions on it from the owners to the town of Atherton, which I suspect you respected, but I just, you didn't mention it, so I assume that you have cleared all the legal hurdles that might have caused.
Yes, I have.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
May I ask, do you have a written statement on that?
At least two, I believe.
Okay, maybe the commission have copies of your
Sure. I don't have a problem with that. It certainly was a tangential question. It's not an environmental.
I understand it
It's
isn't
like-
environmental, but
They wouldn't have it, that's why.
in these days, heirs who have contributed, whose parents and grandparents have contributed money and so forth to various nonprofits and educational
The
institutions.
really short explanation is that any recreational use is allowed pursuant to the deed. And there's case law that says a recreational use includes a library, a museum, and a whole bunch of other things you wouldn't do.
That memo was previously distributed to the planning commission, two months ago, 2 meetings ago, possibly, anyway. We'll get more
Well,
copies.
perhaps I missed it, but at any rate, then I would take it almost that there's no need to modify the general plan nor any zoning ordinance if the library is a recreation.
Well, the general plan and zoning ordinance are separate. Those are things that the town has created as matters of law. The inheritance of the property, the question of whether or not the use is permitted. In fact, the only use is permitted pursuant to the dedication were recreational uses. There's some question, in fact, there's a probability that that's no longer an enforceable condition because of passage of time. But that doesn't matter because in this case, it certainly is appropriate that the library be considered in the recreational zone.
Well, I think we'll await your papers on the subject. Are there, I think we can, yes or nay?
My name's Carl Ferrer, I live at 819 El Camino Real, and what I was wondering is in the report, you mentioned traffic, and I'm wondering if there was any consideration given to the fact that now people are going to be walking down Watkins from El Camino area towards the, crossing El Camino and then walking down Watkins, because that's the main street there, towards El Camino Real, from El Camino Real towards the new library in the park. I was wondering if any consideration was given to the impact on pedestrians in an area with limited width and no sidewalks. Is that something that they consider in the EIR? I don't know.
I guess this is the problem with what we're doing tonight. I think that would fall more in the comments section,
Okay.
if you don't mind.
No, not at all. I just
rather
wanted-
than the purpose of the questions at this time is really to try to ask staff and the EIR offers things about that. But
It's a part of traffic.
yeah,
That's
so
fine. Okay, I'll come back.
why don't you reserve your comment and
Thank you.
ask for further clarification on the rest. Seeing that there's no more questions, since I've cut them off, we'll go to the members of the citizenry outside, out in the front here, and we'll start the process of comments. Remember, the comments are not whether you're for the library and the park or against it. The comments are related at the report, and you'll receive an answer by the authors in due time. So I would ask you to limit your comments to 4 minutes. I will also ask the commissioners if they have any questions of the individual who is making the comments. So who is going to be number 1?
Hey, my name is Earl Nielsen. I live in Burns Avenue, and this is meant as information for the EIR. Recently, we've noticed that the building, the medical building up on the corner of Watkins and El Camino has not received its attention. It's over 11,000 square feet. It's also the other address they have for Menlo Park, since it is in Menlo Park, is 1906 El Camino Real. Designed and built to be a medical building. Unfortunately,